on, guys? It's your boy. Welcome back to another video. So, March has officially came to an end, and that means that it is time to go back through the month of March and rank every single movie that I saw. March, in my opinion, was a pretty big month for movies so far. I mean, January, we only had about like 5 or 6 movies come out. February, we had about 5 or 6 movies come out. But March, we finally had like 14 or 15 big ones. And as per usual, I am only human. I did not have a chance to get to see every single movie that came out in March. There's definitely a couple that I missed, but we're going to go ahead and rank the 11 that I did see. Okay, and for starters, I did want to come on and say all of the movies that I did miss so that if I'm getting towards the top of this list and I haven't mentioned one of these 2 movies, you guys aren't like, oh my god, that's going to be his number 1, because I haven't seen them. So for one, Godzilla x Kong, I'm currently rewatching the entire Legend of Monarch series. I wanted to rewatch the MonsterVerse before I saw this one. So that being said, I haven't had a chance to go see it yet because I still need to watch Kong Skull Island, and I need to watch Godzilla versus Kong. I have seen that one, but I haven't seen it recently enough to really feel confident in my going to go watch that one. So that being said, it's not going to be on the list. And along with that, I haven't seen Love Lies Bleeding, which I was really excited about. I do not think that movie is going to be my cup of tea, but I am still very excited about it, and I want to go see it at some point. I just haven't had the chance. And then another big one that I missed, Late Night with the Devil. I really wanted to go watch it, but because it came out the same week as a couple of other movies on this list, I hadn't had a chance to go see it in theaters. That being said, I am very excited for it. It looks really good. I love David Dastmalchian. I definitely just butchered his name, but I love him in everything that he's in, and I am kind of upset that I missed one of his first times being a lead role in anything. But yeah, that being said, those are all the notable movies that I missed. Now to get into the 11 that I did see. Already in dead last place, we have a very underwhelming sequel. We have Megamind versus the Doom Syndicate. I don't know about you guys, but personally, I think Megamind is one of the best DreamWorks movie. I think that it's very underrated. If I was to rank my top 10 DreamWorks movie, I definitely think that it would be up there. And something that I think is really interesting about Megamind in particular is that I feel like he kind of has like a cult following, in my opinion. I think that it's one of those movies where it's like, if you know somebody who is very passionate about the movie Megamind, they are a huge fan of Megamind, and they will argue that it's one of the best DreamWorks movies. They will argue it's one of the best superhero movies of all time. And I think that it's interesting that DreamWorks as a company was like, oh yeah, we have a lot of people who are really big fans of this movie. They really like this movie. They really enjoy it. And they're like, you know what, maybe we should make a sequel of it. And they did so bad. For one, none of the characters are the characters from the original movie. Not a single one of them. They literally, they might have the same character design. They might be wearing the same clothes or whatever. They are not the same character whatsoever. Megamind had an entire journey throughout the first movie about how he realized that being a villain is not good, and he found the errors of his ways, and he kind of realized that being hell-bent on doing something and then you finally succeeding it's not all it's meant out to be. Like, he kind of lost his purpose in life when he defeated the superhero he's always been chasing, and he realized that being a bad guy just kind of sucks. And one of the big things about Megamind is that he's a loner. He's always been alone. So for them to be like, you know what we're going to do with this movie? We're going to bring in this group of supervillains who we've never heard of, we've never introduced, we never even laid the groundwork for, and we're going to pretend like they were a part of Megamind's crew. This guy who's been a loner his entire life, apparently he had an entire group of bad guys with him the first movie. No, he didn't. And it's terrible to me because I'm like, you can tell that the people who wrote this, the people who are creating this, and the people who are working on this never once decided to watch the first movie and have a general idea of what they're working with. It is a terrible sequel. It's very painful and unwatchable. It feels like a sensory video for children. And it literally, I've compared it to like an episode of, Paw Patrol or some, modern kids TV show. And I feel like even that comparison is like too mean because it's so much worse than an episode of Paw Patrol would be. I really did not like this movie. I really hated everything that they decided to do with the characters. And I really wish they would have just made something else, because you can tell they were making their own story and they didn't really care for the characters. And they just were like, oh, well, let's just throw Megamind in as this character and we'll just pretend like it's a sequel. And it's bad. It's so bad. Coming in 10th place, though, we have one that was an attempt at an original movie. We got the movie Imaginary. I personally have not watched a whole lot of horror movies, and I don't have beef with Blumhouse, but I know a lot of people who do, apparently, and there's a lot of people who are big horror fans who are tired of Blumhouse fumbling a lot of projects that look like they're going to be good. And I think this is another one of those. For one, I feel like something that's huge in horror movies that I've seen, and the few that I've really liked, something that I really enjoy about them is there are characters that you like, and there are characters that you become endeared to, and then it creates a whole new form of like tension whenever scary scenes are happening, because you're like, oh no, I really like this character, I hope something doesn't happen to them. This movie has none of that. Every single character in it, I feel like, is incredibly miserable. They introduce a guy character who's kind of funny, and it kind of seems like he's going to be, a good character in this. And he's not, right? And none of the characters really have any character depth whatsoever. None of them are interesting. And it's really painful to me because this entire movie, this entire concept is interesting. Like, I like the concept of imaginary friends. I think that they did a really good job with that. I think that some of the twist with like Chauncey, the stuffed bear, not actually being there, and like the entire time we thought that the bear was there too, but like it's not. That was a cool twist. And I think that stuff like that could work. But when you're building it around characters who are so uninteresting, and you're building it around a world that doesn't have any development, and you're having this family, which is so just cliche, stereotypical stepmother and the daughter's not really liking the stepmother, whatever. Like, what are you doing? Put some time and effort into your characters and the story, because it's so basic, it's so generic, it's not a great horror movie at all. Coming in 9th place, and this one absolutely broke my heart, and I'm still very upset about it, Kung Fu Panda 4. I feel like it is a talent to make one of the greatest trilogies of all time, do a really good job with animation, make some really, really great movies, and then immediately release another movie that just is absolutely terrible, not at the same scale of the other movies, and is incredibly, incredibly underwhelming. This movie decided, you know what, we're gonna try to bring back the Kung Fu Panda. We're going to, make a big deal about the fact that he's going to be passing the mantle, and then they like montage through some little like audition thing at the beginning of the movie with people trying to be, the new Dragon Warrior, and then Poe's just like, I'm still the Dragon Warrior. I'm going to be the Dragon Warrior. I'm going to choose myself to be the Dragon Warrior. And it's like, it feels so out of place. Shifu just randomly throwing it on him that he needs to pick a new Dragon Warrior seems really out of place. And just everything about this is kind of like similar with the Megamind problem, where it's like, none of these characters really feel like the same character from the other movies. Like, it doesn't feel like they've gone through the experiences of the other movies. And that's really terrible. And then another thing that sucks is the Chameleon could have been a really cool villain. You got it voiced by Viola Davis, who is absolutely incredible in everything she's in. And the concept of a villain who could like change to look like literally anybody is really cool. The fact that they could have potentially, pretended to be Tigress and like got really close to Poe, and then potentially like, fought them, and it would have been a really shocking big reveal, would have been cool. The fact that they pretend to be Tai Lung for a portion of the movie is very interesting. And then they do nothing with it. They have her sitting in a temple like she's, Princess Peach in the old Mario games, and she just waits for, the Kung Fu Dragon Warrior to show up at her doorsteps. And that's exactly what happens. And it drives me insane, because I'm like, how are you going to introduce such a cool concept for a villain and do absolutely nothing with it? And then on top of that, she ends up just, like, pretending to be the other villains for other parts of the movie. And, like, during their big fight sequences or whatever, they just, like, kind of, like, morph into all of the villains from the original trilogy. And it's like, don't remind us of movies that were better than the movie we're currently watching, because we're gonna leave the movie with a bad taste in our mouth and wish that we just watched one of those other movies. And the sequel was not very good. Coming in 8th place, I know I could potentially get a lot of heat for this, but I was not a fan. The movie Immaculate. I know this was Sydney Sweeney's kind of like passion project. She was originally, auditioning for this film when she was younger, and she got pretty far in the audition process before this movie eventually got bankrupted or whatever, and they canceled the project. And she was so passionate about it that after years of Euphoria and doing a couple of other big projects and really making a name for herself, she came back to produce this film, and she really, really liked it. But I will say, this is not my cup of tea. I think that at the end of the day, I'm not into non-horror films. I'm not into any of the religious horror films. If it has an exorcist in it, if it has anything to do with religion, I'm not going to be a fan. And I just couldn't really connect with any of the characters in this. I really tried, but I think that overall, this movie's just really slow paced. It's very boring. It's a little eerie, but it never does really any good jump scares. It's not very like horrifying in that sense. And then the last 20 minutes has some of the most disturbing things I've ever seen in a film, but it's not something that I'm like, yeah, I want to go see a theater just to be like disturbed and scarred for life. Like it's just not something that's for me. I think at the end of the day, there are going to be a lot of people who watch this and are like, oh my god, it's so poetic, and like the last 20 minutes is like showing her descent to hell or whatever. And I'm like, I guess you can see it that way. I just see it as we watch a 9-month pregnant woman who's brands on her feet go around a temple and just murder a bunch of, people who were treating her like shit the entire movie, which was refreshing. It felt cool. It felt very well earned, but it just was like so weird because like, why did she wait 9 months to do this? And like, then we watched her give live birth, and then it was terrible. I really wish I could unsee that entire movie, if I'm being honest. Alrighty, and coming in 7th place, we have a pretty forgettable movie. This one came out at the beginning of the month, and I genuinely could not tell you much about it. We got Spaceman, starring Adam Sandler. This was a Netflix original movie. I believe it's based off of an old book. And the concept is just a man who's off in space who becomes so incredibly lonely that he invites upon him, basically, an alien creature who is so fascinated about mankind and humanity and wants to learn more about these people. And then it basically just becomes like an 1.5 hour long therapy session with Adam Sandler, who's kind of treated his wife like shit pretty much forever. And this spider who's just like, oh my god, it's really interesting how you feel so much like grief and so much loss and so much guilt, and how you really wish you could have been there for her, but then you weren't there for her because you're lonely and you always run away because you're afraid of your problems and stuff like that. And it's like, okay, like there's some things with this movie that work for me, but I'm like, overall, I think that they just do such a bad job of like making Adam Sandler's character like redeemable at all. Like at the end, he has like a phone call or whatever where he's like, oh, by the way, I really wish I could have done it all differently, and I'm so sorry, and I realized the error of my ways. But it's like, he basically had to have a giant talking space spider tell him that in order for him to change his ways. I maybe this one just was like too complex for me. It went over my head, but I was like, I was not a fan of this movie. And I feel like it was pretty straightforward. And like some of the acting sequences worked. I think that a lot of the visuals and everything worked. But yeah, this one's just another one where it's like, it's just not my cup of tea. Alrighty, but now we're about halfway through our list. Coming in 6th place, we have Ghostbusters: The Frozen Empire. I feel like we've got to that point in the list where it's like, March had a lot of movies that were good, like just shut your brain off and watch the movie, and if you enjoy it, you enjoy it. If you don't, you don't. But these next like 4 are probably interchangeable in my opinion. But for me, Ghostbusters: Frozen Empire, it was funny, right? I had a good time at the theater. There were a couple of sequences that were really fun. I think that some of the stuff with Finn Wolfhard messing around with Slimer was interesting, even though it had nothing to do with the plot. It was interesting. And I think that there's a lot of really great comedy in this, like I said. You go to a Ghostbusters movie for the comedy, and I definitely think that that's what you went to see this movie for. It's great. Paul Rudd is fantastic. McKenna Grace is fantastic. They kind of are doing a good bit of world building here, which I think is interesting if they're going to potentially do more with this. I think that they, I don't know if it was announced or if it's been rumored, but supposedly one of the directors had mentioned that they're potentially going to be doing a spin-off like Ghostbusters show. I don't know what's going on with that, but I'm kind of interested for it. I actually really like the way that they're setting up stuff for this potentially being a trilogy. And I like the fact that they're diving into Phoebe, McKenna Grace's character, having a lot of relationships with ghosts. Like, I think that stuff is cool, but at the end of the day, this movie ends up falling flat because it has about 12 to 14 characters in it, and none of them really have enough time to shine. None of them really feel like they need to be there. None of them really have character arcs. And they all just kind of like take away moments from each other. Like, I feel like this movie could have been really good if they focused on the 4 main characters and they had the 4 main characters, the new Spengler family, just kind of like doing everything that happens in this movie. And instead they like kind of split it up between like, here's this group with podcast and you know, Lucky, I believe Dr. Lucky, is that his name? They go off and they do this little side quest. And then we have, you know, the Fire Master and everything that's going on with him, and he's going off and doing his own thing. And then we have, you know, Winston is over here like creating a whole new branch of the Ghostbusters. Then we meet them and we kind of know what they're doing. And then the original family is now going ghostbusting without Phoebe because she's a child and she shouldn't be ghostbusting. And then we have Phoebe meeting her little ghost friend, and it's like, why do we have like 7 different stories going on here when we should really probably only have like maybe 2? Like the stuff with the Ghostbusters going out ghostbusting without McKenna Grace, and then what's going on with McKenna Grace, and then those 2 stories should have collided at the end. And instead we had like 7 subplots collide into one, and then we had a 5-minute climax that kind of sucked. wasn't great. But coming in 5th place, I know this is probably a very unpopular opinion, but I thought Ricky Stenicki was very funny. I think that this style of humor just works incredibly well for me. I think that John Cena is one of the funniest actors alive right now, and everything about his character is fantastic in this. I think that this movie works for me, but I feel like if they casted literally anybody else as Ricky Stenicki, it wouldn't have. It's just a fun little feel-good comedy. Three best friends who grew up and we're like, oh my god, anytime they had to go do something, they used Ricky as an excuse. And then, like, John Cena coming in to play Ricky, being somebody who's an over-the-top, method actor. It's funny. It's hilarious. There's a lot of bits that I really like in here. Like, in my opinion, a trope that will always work on me is when one person's like, hey, what if we do the, like, morally correct thing? And then the other people are kind of like, no, why would we do that? That's crazy. Are you stupid? I love that trend, that trope in movies. Anytime it ever happens, it's always one of my favorite things ever. When, like, one character is, like, actually being smart and reasonable, and then everybody else is acting like they're the bad guy for wanting to do something that's smart and reasonable. It's funny. Once again, this is one of those shut your brain off, watch it. If you like it, you like it. You don't, you don't. And I do know that this style of humor didn't work for a lot of people, but I think it went rated R. It really went for it. There was a lot of really outlandish stuff happening in it, and I loved it. I had a good time with it. Coming in 4th place, we have another Amazon Prime original. We have the movie Roadhouse. This is another one where it's like, once again, turn your brain off. If you watch it, if you enjoy it, you enjoy it. If you don't, you don't. Personally, I do have a couple of biases that I have to admit. Daniela Melchior, if she is in anything, I'm watching it and I'm probably going to love it. And she's great in this, and I love her. And then on top of that, I love, like, the small town hero trope, and I think that they do it in this movie incredibly well. As somebody who grew up in a small town, I love the fact that, like, one day he wakes up and, like, everybody knows his name now. They're like, oh my god, it's Dalton. Oh my god, hey Dalton, you're a cool friend, Dalton, and all that stuff. And I'm like, as somebody who grew up in a small town, that's very real. Like, somebody comes in from out of town or whatever, if they're, like, somebody who's moving in and there's somebody who's expected to be a permanent resident, the majority of people knew their name pretty early on. And, like, just small stuff like that, I'm like, I could connect to that. And I thought that was funny. And then on top of that, great fight sequences. So many great fight sequences. I love the fact that some of these fight sequences literally feel like an anime fight brought to life. Like, they're using a bunch of different cool camera lenses. They're doing a bunch of different really cool, like, camera shifts and stuff like that. A lot of really interesting angles. Whenever we have the moment where Jake Gyllenhaal and Conor McGregor are having their first fight sequence, and then Jake Gyllenhaal's, like, kind of looks like he's down from the count, and then we have a first-person sequence for a little bit. Really cool stuff. I think that overall, the fighting choreography alone in this movie is something to talk about. Like, I think it's pretty solid, and obviously, I haven't seen a lot of really big action movies. I haven't finished the John Wick franchise, but to me, this was great. Like, this was everything you would want out of a movie of, hot men fighting. And Conor McGregor plays a great wild card villain in this. Like, I'm not gonna lie, I would love to see Conor McGregor potentially be in more projects as that kind of, like, unhinged henchman. He did great. Coming in 3rd place, we have Millie Bobby Brown's Damsel. I personally was not expecting to like this movie. I saw a lot of the trailers and I was like, I feel like Millie Bobby Brown isn't the best actress for this. Like, I feel like it just didn't feel like a movie that she would fit in well with. And I was completely wrong. Her acting in this was pretty good. And I like the way that they kind of did this fun little fairy tale adventure, and then they, like, very quickly had it flip completely on its head, and then it was going to be like a horror thriller thing, and it was pretty cool. I think that the dragon looks pretty good for the most part, and I think that, like I said earlier, the acting with Millie Bobby Brown is pretty good. Like, she does a relatively good job. There's a lot of sequences where she's pretty much completely by herself, but she's able to say, like, so much about what is going on with just her body language, and her acting in this is very solid, like I said. And for the most part, I think that the majority of this movie works. It just, towards the end, feels really rushed. And then I also kind of wish that we spent more time in the beginning as this being a fun little whimsy fairy tale world, because whenever it does get flipped on its head, it doesn't really feel like earned. Like, it doesn't really feel like, oh my god, no, this fairy tale isn't real, because we've only enjoyed the fairy tale for about, like, 10 minutes in the movie. I don't know. But that being said, I enjoyed it. And now coming in 2nd place, a movie that some people probably haven't even seen and or heard of, the movie Snack Shack. This was a fun little passion project. I believe the director said that this is a movie that he's been writing and working on for a really long time, and he's happy that he finally got to make it. fun little comedy that takes place in the 90s. If you ever want to see a movie about, teenage boys being stupid and being teenage boys and doing something stupid and having to learn from the consequences of their actions, this is a perfect one for that. I think that they do such a good job of setting up these characters really early on. They have an opening sequence that immediately gives us a perfect example of what this friendship dynamic is going to be. And the main character being somebody who's kind of like shy and timid and having his, over-the-top friend that's an extrovert who's kind of like a bad influence on him and kind of dragging him into doing things that he doesn't really want to do. But ultimately, having a good time and being able to have like a really, really fun summer that he's going to remember for the rest of his life. It's a fun little joyride. I think that there's a lot of comedy in this that works really well for a lot of people. I really like how over the top some of the like 90s references and stuff are. And I think that overall there's a really interesting like love triangle in this movie. And there's obviously a lot of moments that like some people are probably not going to care for if they're just going to see a comedy. But to me, I feel like this movie feels very reminiscent of the movie The Perks of Being a Wallflower. I feel like the main character really feels like a wallflower a little bit. He feels like he doesn't really fit in a lot of places. And by the end of the movie, he kind of comes out of his shell a little bit. He has a great coming of age story here. And he learns lessons that he's probably going to remember for the rest of his life. And on top of that, the last 30 minutes, there's a very heartbreaking scene. I'm not going to say much about it or talk about it here because if you haven't seen the movie, I really do not want to ruin it for you. But I would definitely recommend watching this movie. I think it's great. And I think it's one of those movies that's definitely going to fly under the radar for a lot of people. But I saw it. I resonated a lot with pretty much both of the main characters. Like the two guys, I feel like a lot of teenage boys will probably watch this movie and like they'll be like, I'm really the main character, or oh, I'm really the secondary character. And I feel like either way, it's you'll resonate with it and you'll probably be able to relate a lot to some of these characters. And I think it's fun. But to no one's surprise, coming in first place, we have the movie Dune Part 2. I've talked about this movie a lot. I will continue to talk about this movie a lot. By far one of the best movies I've ever seen. It's a brilliant sci-fi thriller. I think that they do such a great job with all of the visuals, all the effects. The cast is absolutely perfect. There's not necessarily a single like standout, and it's because they're all just insanely good. They're all incredible together. They're on like the highest tier of acting you can possibly have. Everybody's so prestige. Everybody feels so otherworldly. And the way that they tell the story is great. Like this is another one of those movies where it's like, it's 2.5 hours. It's a long movie, but it does not feel like 2.5 hours. It kind of felt like an hour, maybe 27 minutes because they grab your attention and they just run with it. There's fun action sequence after fun action sequence after really heartfelt moments and after great character development sequences and really good love story between Paul Atreides and Jaina. And they do such a really good job. Once again, I know I probably butchered her name. I haven't said it in this video yet, but I think I'm pronouncing her name wrong on every single one of these. But is it Shiny? Is it Shiny? I don't. Zendaya's character. But their love relationship story is really good, and I love the way that they are able to paint the tragedy of being the chosen one and kind of having this predetermined path that he really doesn't want to follow, but because of circumstances he kind of has to, and then eventually him stepping into the shoes of being who he's supposed to be and being the Lisan al-Gaib. And it's a very interesting story. I really like the ability that they have to kind of create this really deep, like intricate story about religion and make it about like believers versus non-believers and show kind of the it's a cautionary tale. It's a cautionary tale. And yeah, sorry, I had to throw that clip in because anytime I say a cautionary tale, I'm immediately thinking of that. But what's it called? I think that they do such a good job of showing how you shouldn't necessarily follow a charismatic leader. Sometimes following a charismatic leader can lead to really bad things. And I think that that's stuff that's obviously going to potentially happen in a future movie. But they just do such great world building in here. Such great politics, such great characters. And overall, brilliant movie. Like I said, I could talk about it all day. I'm going to go ahead and cut myself off there. But yeah, that was my video. That was my rating. If you guys have any disagreements, you guys have any comments, questions, concerns, feel free to leave them down in the comments below. If you guys want to tell me your rankings down below, I would love to talk about them. I think that this month was really hard because there's a lot of mediocre movies. Like I feel like almost all of the movies that came out this month were really mediocre, except for like Dune Part 2 was really good. And then the last couple of movies that on my list, like Kung Fu Panda 4 and Megamind 2, were both really, really bad. But like everything in the middle, I feel like it could go like all over the place for different people. But yeah, that being said, that was it for this video, guys. Thank you guys so much for coming by checking it out. I love and appreciate you guys so much for watching. If you liked it, feel free to like and subscribe, and I'll hopefully see you guys in the next one. Peace out. Bow. Back at it again, but that's a relevant flow. So smooth, they calling me Mr. Elegant. Like an elephant, I got a long nose. Like a president, I've got a few hoes. Swift with a stutter, I'm smooth like butter. Don't see it coming when I slip undercover. Like a big dog, but I don't bite. I'm still a big broad, I'd win that fight. Come match you and I knock out your lights.